Hello everyone, my name is Paulina Duron. This is my dual language education interview and culminating project for Dual Language Education BED 5335. For part one of my presentation, it will encompass my dual language education interview with a third grade dual language educator, Ms. Munoz from Isleta Independent School District, and she teaches a 50-50 dual language model. My first interview question was, what do you believe it takes to develop a strong dual language education model? Ms. Munoz responded by saying, I believe that there are various components that develop a strong dual language education model. In particular, which percentage of English and partner language is being implemented, and if it's being implemented in the classroom with accuracy. The second interview question was, what do you believe it takes to sustain a strong dual language education model? Ms. Munoz stated, I think that in order to sustain a strong DLE model, there must be professional development that supports bilingual students and promotes biliteracy. There has to be an understanding of how to implement the time management to allotting specific amounts of time for each individual language. My third interview question was, what are your biggest challenges? Ms. Munoz said, my biggest challenges are being able to create cross-linguistic connections in lessons and continuing the content from one language to the other and supporting students' strengths in their native languages. Resources were also a huge challenge because there are very few and most have to be created on a personal time, which can be very overwhelming for educators. Interview questions continued. My fourth interview question was, where do you believe you need support? Ms. Munoz said, I think where I need support is being able to collaborate with more educators instead of only one other dual language teacher in the grade level. Because planning isn't only for my subject, but for the grade level, but also planning for the dual language portion. And finally, my last question was, what is your stance on dual language education? Ms. Munoz talked about how it was something very dear to her heart because as a child, her education was entirely seen as language as a problem. So she adamantly believes in dual language education and in promoting biliteracy for emergent bilingual students and providing this opportunity for them to become biliterate. Here are my findings. Some of the findings about the program in the district is that it was a dual language 50-50 model, meaning that the time allocation was specifically designed so that it's 50% in English and 50% in Spanish, and it's not necessarily something that's implemented throughout the entire district. It's more of the bilingual dual language program that the school has, and they do support the program. One of the things I did notice was that it's very difficult for them because there are only 2 dual language teachers during the entire grade level. So it's very difficult for them to plan and they have to create their own resources. So that's something that's very concerning and that there are a lot of difficulties. What I learned about dual language education leadership and doing this project for dual language education is that there are so many advocates for dual language education and for creating this multilingual and multicultural society, and that being able to talk to other educators who feel the same way opens up those doors of collaboration that we really want to touch into, especially when there aren't many people for us to collaborate with in our grade level. So maybe even expanding with other educators and being able to promote this biliteracy and to encourage it, not only in one school, but yes, across the district instead of just schools or specific schools. Part 2 of my project is, what is dual language education? Here I will respond, what is dual language? What does it encompass? What kind of leadership is necessary for this? What is biliteracy? And how can we promote and encourage this development of dual language education to be implemented successfully? There are 7 strands that are described as the guiding principles for dual language education. Strand number 1 talks about the program structure, which is what are the school programs? What are the visions and goals? What does equity mean? What is the leadership team composed of? How is the model being implemented? What dual language education model is being implemented? What is the planning and how is it being implemented? Strand number 2 talks about curriculum. So what are the standards in the assessment that are meaningful, that have the rigor, that are academically challenging? And what promotes high order thinking with emergent bilingual students? Strand number 3 is instruction. So dual language education programs are a little bit more complex because the goal is to achieve bilingualism in our emergent bilingual students and to achieve biliteracy and sociocultural competence, where students feel pride in acknowledging differences and similarities and what they have to offer to society. Strand number 4 is assessment and accountability. So being able to use student data through assessments in order to change instructional programs, in order to adapt and do what's best for students. Strand number 5 is staff quality and PD. So an effective dual language program requires teachers and staff that are able to continue in professional development, continue their growth, and continue their knowledge in order to implement much better for our emergent bilingual students. Strand number 6 is family and community. So what kind of environment and relationship do schools encourage with families? What kind of commitments do we share with the community, with not only our students, but incorporating both their families and the students to ultimately come together to shape this kind of dual language education and make it successful? Strand number 7 is support and resources. So for dual language education programs, making sure that there's strong administrative support, that the Board of Education and state policies, that everything is being geared towards making a successful program, and to follow these guiding principles for dual language education in order to have students and emergent bilinguals to become biliterate. Dual language education can be implemented with different time allocations as shown in the following graph. We have a 90-10 program and a 50-50 program. The best is a two-way immersion 50-50 model, and this ensures that instruction is going to be provided equally in the partner language and in English throughout the entire dual language program in order to achieve bilingualism and biliteracy and reinforce this academic achievement, to make sure that students are making these cross-linguistic connections and being able to grow academically as well as linguistically. The sociocultural competence is being able to create emergent bilingual students that celebrate differences, that value their identity, and that they offer this vision of dismantling oppression and learning through a social justice lens. There are different dual language education models, but the one that I am reinforcing is the 50-50 dual language model, and that means that the schedule would be including instruction in both languages equally every single day. With dual language education, the purpose is biliteracy, which is the ability to perform all language components in more than one language. So we start with what is biliteracy. Biliteracy is being able to read, write, speak, think, listen, and most importantly, to make these metalinguistic awareness skills. And so we have this approach called the Literacy Squared approach, which is based on a holistic biliteracy framework. With Literacy Squared, there are 4 different components, which are instruction, assessment, professional development, and research. So the purpose of Biliteracy Squared than other bilingual education programs is that there is an equal amount of time provided for dual language education, meaning that instruction is both in the native language and in English. Biliteracy develops as one component altogether, rather than having these different systems in one language, and one separately for reading, one separately for writing, one separately for listening and speaking. Everything, all of these different components, including metalanguage, are part of this paired literacy and holistic biliteracy development that encourages the growth and development for emergent bilingual students. through research, we find this holistic biliteracy framework, which is going back to the previous slide and making these different cross-linguistic connections, going from literacy-based instruction in English and literacy-based instruction in Spanish, and combining those two as one holistic framework where they're connecting languages and they're doing these amazing cross-linguistic connections. And we also have the English Learners Long-Term Achievement by Program model. This is something that I have seen throughout my entire career as an educator, and every time that I've decided to pursue my education as an educator, which demonstrates that two-way dual language is the most effective model and the most effective bilingual program for emergent bilinguals. It supports them in their grades, in their academic achievement, in their sociocultural competence, and this graph demonstrates that not only when they're simultaneously learning, they're able to develop these meta-linguistic awareness and promote biliteracy. And their grades are definitely growing, and this is through different assessments. And this just demonstrates that the dual language program model is what is more efficient and successful for these students, but that it is a longitudinal program that needs to be developed throughout the grade levels. Leadership is one of the most important portions of the dual language education program. In dual language education, it's important to realize that leadership is not only the principle, it's a collaboration. It takes a village. So dual language education is being able to prioritize a student's native language and offering a path towards biliteracy through community, through district leaders, through teachers, through families. And there are so many things that are necessary for effective leadership in dual language education. But effective leaders have this ability to visualize a multilingual and multicultural society, and reinforcing dual language education programs, especially making sure that there are resources and funding, and that there are all of these different things that are able to support educators and support the community and the students in order to promote and achieve this biliteracy. Another incredibly important portion of leadership is relationships with families and the community. Like I had mentioned before, it takes a village. So leadership are advocates for this implementation of the program. So it's very important to stay on top of educational bilingual development policies and the responsibility that goes behind that, behind bilingual education policies, and what students need to have, the support that they need to be receiving, and the support that educators need to have in order to enforce all of these different things that are necessary in order to provide students with an equitable education. Finally, in order to sustain a successful dual language education program, there is not only something that occurs and happens in education. It's not something natural, especially in a nation that has this monocultural, monolingual lens and that reinforces English as a superior language. Sustainability means being able to implement and sustain this dual language education, meaning there's effective preparation, there's effective planning, there's an advocacy for dual language education, having educators come together, having the community come together, and those in leadership roles reinforcing and making sure that these students are having and receiving an equitable education that is not only inclusive, but making sure that the time allotted is being able to receive instruction in that 50-50 model so that students are becoming simultaneous bilinguals and getting to that point of achieving biliteracy, making them so much more successful in society and creating a monolingual and monocultural world that we should be so proud to have and to be a part of.